$9 billion. Gone. Built on a machine that did not work. Sold to patients who trusted it with their lives. And the woman who built it was on the cover of Forbes magazine the same week her own scientists were telling her internally that the technology was impossible. Her name is Elizabeth Holmes, and she did not just commit fraud, she committed fraud on the people who were most vulnerable to it. The sick, the scared, the people sitting in a Walgreens or a Safeway waiting for a blood test result that would tell them whether they had cancer, whether their medication was working, whether they were going to be okay. Those results were wrong. She knew they were wrong, and she kept selling them anyway. Stay with me, because the way she pulled this off for 11 years, in Silicon Valley, surrounded by some of the smartest investors and most powerful board members in America, is the story of how charisma, secrecy, and the desperate desire to believe in something revolutionary can make otherwise intelligent people ignore every warning sign right in front of them. Elizabeth Holmes dropped out of Stanford at 19. She had one idea, a small device that could run hundreds of medical tests from a single drop of blood. No needles, no labs, no waiting days for results. Instant, accurate, affordable blood testing available to everyone. The idea was genuinely revolutionary, if it had worked. She founded Theranos in 2003. She raised money from venture capitalists who were dazzled by her pitch, her vision, and her deliberate channeling of Steve Jobs. She wore black turtlenecks. She lowered her voice to an artificially deep register that she maintained in every public appearance. She spoke in the language of disruption and democratization and changing the world. Silicon Valley loved her. By 2014, Theranos was valued at $9 billion. Holmes personally was worth $4.5 billion on paper. She had assembled a board of directors that included George Shultz, Henry Kissinger, James Mattis, and William Perry. Former secretaries of state, former defense secretaries, a future secretary of defense. The most impressive board in Silicon Valley. None of them had medical or scientific backgrounds. None of them were equipped to evaluate whether the technology actually worked. The technology did not work. It had never worked. The fundamental scientific premise of Theranos, that a single drop of blood from a fingertip could run the same tests as a standard venous blood draw with equivalent accuracy, was not achievable with the technology Holmes claimed to have developed. Her own scientists knew this. They told her. They documented their concerns. Some of them quit. Some of them were threatened with legal action for even suggesting the technology had limitations. What Theranos was actually doing in its laboratories was running most of its tests on conventional third-party machines made by Siemens and other established medical device companies. The revolutionary Edison device that Holmes showed to investors and partners was being used for a tiny fraction of actual tests, and even those results were frequently unreliable. The company was a laboratory services company using standard equipment and presenting itself to the world as a revolutionary technology company. The patients who received Theranos test results at Walgreens and Safeway locations across Arizona and California had no idea. They made medical decisions based on those results. They adjusted medications. They pursued or declined further testing. Some received false positives that triggered unnecessary procedures. Some received false negatives that delayed necessary treatment. The human cost of the inaccurate results is still being counted. The fraud unraveled in 2015 when Wall Street Journal reporter John Carreyrou published the first of a series of devastating investigative pieces. Carreyrou had spent months cultivating sources inside Theranos, former employees who had been afraid to speak publicly because of the aggressive non-disclosure agreements Holmes used to silence critics. His reporting revealed the gap between what Theranos was claiming and what it was actually doing. Holmes's response was to attack the reporting. She called Carreyrou's sources disgruntled former employees. She appeared on CNBC and told the interviewer that the story was factually incorrect. She continued raising money and signing new partnership agreements even as the regulatory walls were closing in. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services inspected Theranos' laboratory in 2015 and found conditions so deficient that it threatened patient safety. CMS eventually revoked Theranos' laboratory certification and banned Holmes from operating a laboratory for 2 years. The company, without its laboratory certification, had no business. It collapsed within months. In 2018, Holmes and her former president Ramesh Balwani were indicted on federal wire fraud charges. The trial was delayed by the pandemic and by Holmes' pregnancy. It finally concluded in January 2022. Holmes was convicted on 4 counts of fraud against investors. She was acquitted on charges related to defrauding patients, a legal outcome that many victims found devastating. She was sentenced to 11 years and 3 months in federal prison. She reported to prison in May 2023. She is appealing her conviction. The investors who lost their money included Rupert Murdoch, who lost $125 million, the DeVos family, the Walton family, and dozens of other wealthy individuals and institutions. They lost money they could afford to lose. The patients who received wrong test results lost something that cannot be measured in dollars. Elizabeth Holmes convinced the smartest people in Silicon Valley that she had done something impossible. She wore the right clothes, she spoke the right language. She surrounded herself with the most impressive names she could recruit. And for 11 years, in a culture that worshipped disruption and celebrated the founder who defied conventional wisdom, nobody with the power to stop her was willing to ask the simple question that would have ended everything. Does it actually work? If you believe the public deserves to know where the money actually goes, subscribe. Every week we cover the frauds, the scandals, and the financial crimes the system wants you to forget.